Hi and welcome to this talk about foldables. My name is Kenneth Christensen and I'm going to be your presenter today. I work at a company called Intel. At Intel, I work on standardization, such as specifications for the World Wide Web, done in the World Wide Web Consortium, as well as working on browsers such as Chrome and Edge in the Chromium project. I'm also an elected member of the W3C TAG, which stands for the Technical Architecture Group. Basically, charged with the stewardess of the web architecture, making sure that all newer specifications and features coming to the web work in conjunction, work well together, and serves the need of web developers such as yourselves. You might be wondering, why does Intel care about the web at all? Well, as our friends at Microsoft are telling, is that more than 60% of the time spent on a PC is actually within the web browser. And even further than that, a lot of people use other applications such as Visual Studio Code or Slack that are actually also built with web technology. The web is great because it has great reach and low friction. It's also ephemeral, meaning if you go to a website and you never use it again, those resources, the cache entries, will be removed over time. Unlike native apps you might have installed on your phone that will keep being updated even though you're not using the app. There are a lot of other things great about the web, such as it being safe. Like you can go to a different website, a lot of different websites every week without feeling that you get compromised. It's also indexable, so you can find content through different search engines, not just like an app store. You can also take a link to a specific site. For instance, it could be a specific tweet, and you can share that, for instance, with your mom, and your mom will be able to see that exact tweet immediately. Not first having to install an app and then maybe like losing track of where that exact tweet was. With all that said, the web is also really great for different devices because it adapts across different screen sizes and device factors. And this is one of the things that we are taking advantage of today. So first of all, we're going to look at new form factors coming to the whole ecosystem, such as dual screens and foldable screens. So on this example, you see what we call dual screens. It's kind of like it's supposed to be like one visual screen for the user, the OS point of view, but it's actually created by having two different screens that are put together with a physical hinge in between. Other screens are actual foldable screens where the screen itself can fold, so it's actually one physical screen that also serves as one virtual screen. These new devices are great because they're ultra portable and flexible and really designed for multitasking. But in order to really work, we need to be able to create applications for them. And as I work on the web, I am looking at how to create applications for these devices on the web, which means that we need to extend the web with those abilities. For this, we've been working on a lot of different ideas and specification, and some of them might actually be joined in the future. Some of these are the CSS spanning media query done by Microsoft and Intel. There's the Windows Segments Enumeration API by Microsoft and Intel. There's the Screen Fold API by Samsung and Intel, and there's Virtual Keyboard by Microsoft. So let's look at the different concepts. So as you see on this screen, a lot of these devices can have different postures, such as work as a tablet mode, as a book mode, laptop mode, and the like. First, we'll look at the spanning media query. So people that use regular web technologies, CSS and HTML, will be familiar with media queries. So we have to think of these devices as just another responsive target. It's only considered as it works as one virtual screen. There's only going to be like one viewport as well. You might be able to have your browser on one of the screens, one side of this virtual viewport or virtual screen, or you might expand it across both. And you need the web apps to know about that so they can adapt and look great, especially when you have that physical hinge in between. But even if you have a screen that doesn't have a physical hinge in between, but actually has a foldable screen itself, it might not be so great at touching at that point in the middle because it might be bended and it might be less responsive. So we're having one viewport, even with dual screens. We're trying to keep it simple and familiar to web developers. In this example you're seeing on the screen right now, this is what we call the single fold vertical. What you see on the screen now is what we call the single fold horizontal. And you might have screens that don't have any folds, thus this is what we call the spanning mode of none. You might be wondering, why do I need to know about the fold posture? Because we already have like orientation media feature, there's even a ratio media feature as well. Isn't that enough? Actually, as I show you in this example, is I might have the browser on one screen, if you look at the first example, and in that case the browser would be portrait, but the device itself would be in landscape. So you really need to know about both. In this example, we just try to make the screen orange. Very easy. Set the background color orange, and all of the different devices on the screen becomes orange. If you want to target something like the phone in the middle, we can look at, for instance, a max width in CSS pixels, and here we set it to green, so we can target this device. But as you notice is that the monitor and the dual screen, they more or less have the same size. So in this case, we'd need to look at the spanning media query and say, well, if it's a single fold vertical, then we make it yellow. So this works great. But what we really want is to have control over the spanning. If you see the two first pictures on the top, these look really nice, like the content is really nice, integrated, and you see I'm running two different browsers. But below, I'm spanning a browser across both physical screens. And as you see in the first example, some of the content is kind of cut in the middle. So we really would like it to look, if you follow the area, like on that side, like really being able to lay it out in that way would be much better for users. So in this example, we have an example we did at Intel, mostly done by my co-worker Alexis. And you see if you span that across both screens, it's not the nicest experience. Things kind of get cut, especially now we try to look at the image like this hero image. This is not the experience we're trying to have. So what we really want to do is allow developers to do the following, or something like this. So this is basically with the example we just showed you. This has supporting this new feature. This is what you could do instead. So instead of cutting the images in the middle and scrolling and showing them in the middle, we just show the hero image or the image that is focused on the other side, on one of the sides. Much nicer experience. The way it works is that it's based on CSS environmental variables. So this is a more or less new feature in CSS. It allows you to query these environmental variables. So for instance, we should be able to query where this fold is, or this hinge. So we're having things like fold left, as you see in this example, or fold top. Actually in total we have fold top, fold left, fold width, and fold height. And with this, you can actually create these kinds of experiences as I just showed you. In some cases, you don't use CSS. You might be using JavaScript or a canvas tag. It might be a whole experience, a game that is written in WebGL. In that case, you cannot use CSS. And for this reason, we also have a JavaScript version called Windows Segment Enumeration API. It's a very simple API, just a single function where you call get window segment. And on a regular screen, you will get one. But if you have one of these dual screens, you would get two. So just like before, we have access to top and left and right, etc. So you can really do the same thing using this API as the CSS version. So this is really great for like Canvas 2D, WebGL, even like CSS Paint Worklab, or if you're developing some layout system using, even the CSS layout system using JavaScript. We're looking at extending this to the future because it seems that there are even people toying around with having devices with more than one fold. So we want to make sure that the API is prepared for that as well, while still keeping it really simple to use, especially in common cases as one fold. Let's now look at the keyboard as well. Normally on a device, if you have a virtual keyboard, such as on a tablet or on a phone, when the keyboard pops up, like when you select some text, normally the viewport is resized, so it's actually smaller. That's kind of nice because you see like everything stays the same place, and you can make sure that the input field that you were touching is actually not below the keyboard. Really nice, but it doesn't work so great with these dual screens because you might have the keyboard just on one side because it's maybe a 9-inch device, right? And that case, you would actually resize the viewport on the other side as well, leaving this area that's kind of just showing the background, as you see here. And that is not always the experience you want, because, for instance, if this was something like an email client, you would like, maybe on the right side, you want the email you're composing, but on the left side, you still maybe want to see like your email, or maybe you want to see the calendar entries or something else, and you don't want it resized. So the ideal behavior would be something like this. The way we're solving this, or the way that Microsoft is solving this, is allowing people to opt in to have the keyboard not resize the viewport, but overlay instead. Of course, like, the content needs to be aware of that and react to it. So we have I'm just showing one example of how this could look. So this is an example I created. So you see the keyboard pops up on one side, things scroll nicely in view, everything works great. And this is from an example where I toyed around with ways that you could do this from CSS, but currently the API is actually just using JavaScript. So you just get the bounding rect, and then you have to be able to do everything. Then you can do everything manually yourself. This solves a lot of issues with the keyboard. Something else with these devices is that as they actually have a hinge, they also have a fold angle. And if you remember, like, old children's books, like when you open them up, something might pop out. So it would be nice to actually react to these devices being opened and closed, but also change the whole experience on what kind of posture the device is in. You can imagine having a game, like a battleship game, where you don't want to show the battleship to your opponent unless it's kind of in a tent mode. So one would look from one side and one would look from the other side. So you can kind of like adopt the experience to these postures. So as we looked before, there are very different postures available. So I've been working on this specification with my friend from Samsung, Diego. And we actually looked at like how these devices are working today and what postures exist. So as a no fold posture, if the device doesn't have any postures, there's no hinge, but also like laptop, flat, tent, tablet, and book mode. But also looking at like what are the exact like angles that people use for these postures to try to make this as uniform as possible. So you can create an example like this. For instance, if this device is holding what we call laptop posture, we might change the name. And it's a single fold horizontal, then I can like change the whole experience so that you get like the dialer thing on the lower part and the picture of who you're calling on the upper part. Same thing with the animations. Have a simple event listener you can call. You'll get the angle out, and then you can animate anything using, for instance, the Web Animations API. Very powerful and interesting capabilities. We've also been working on polyfill. It's kind of hard to polyfill something if you don't have a device with a hinge, but at least this allows you to play around with it. So you get this nice little widget where you can change the fold angle and even the orientation of the device, and then you can kind of like adjust your CSS, etc., and play around with this. So very interesting. So you might be wondering, what is the status of these features? When do I see this in web browsers? So the CSS spanning media query is available. It's actually available on Android as well today. So it's on Android and Windows 10 X, but it's as an experiment. It's also what's called an origin trial. So you need to use the Edge browser and ask for an origin trial, and then you can actually use it on your website. Same thing with the window segmentation API. ScreenFold API is really new, and there's only a very early implementation for Samsung Internet that works on Samsung's dual screen devices. Same thing with the virtual keyboard. We've also been working on polyfills, so that those features are not widely available, and some of the hardware is also not widely available across the globe, we have created polyfills for all these features. So these are small libraries you can put in your website, and then you can actually like configure these configurations and play around with it and see how your applications adapt. So as you see, here's one for the CSS features, the spanning CSS media feature. Here's for the JavaScript API, the window segment generation API. And there's even this nice little widget. It's like a web component that you can put into your website or web app, and it will show this configuration widget so you can change things and play around with it. So my coworker has worked on a lot of cool demos with a bit of my help, And here's an example of it, of the photo gallery that you just saw before. If you look at the bottom, you see this bottom right actually, you see this small little widget that allows you to play around and emulate a dual screen. So now we click on dual screen mode, and you can see that now the whole application, the web app, adjusts to that. You can also expand it and get like more features. You can even like choose different devices, so you can kind of like see how it will look, for instance, on a Surface Neo, and you can change the orientation and all of those things. So this is really powerful way that developers can start playing around with this today. There's also another example of a battleship game. So this also shows the power of these APIs. As you see again, we have this configuration widget that allows you to emulate this on your desktop computer. There's also coming DevTools support to Microsoft Edge. So this is actually already, I believe it's in the Canary version. So you can see here in DevTools, you can go in and actually play around with these things as well. In this case, you would not need the polyfills. But the polyfills works in any browser out there. So with that said, I really hope you're really interested in these new capabilities coming to the web. I would really like you to join the effort. Lots of this work is going on GitHub and in different working groups in the W3C, such as the Devices and Sensors working group, the CSS working group for the CSS extensions, and the Second Screen incubation group. With that said, I would say thank you for listening, and if you have any question and want to talk to me, feel free to follow me on Twitter at Kenneth Road. And with that, I hope you'll have a very enjoyable conference.
That was so cool. Thank you, Kenneth. I'm going to bring Kenneth up for questions now. Hi, Kenneth.
Hi there.
How are you? Where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from Copenhagen, Denmark. It's a very non-sunny day, raining outside, but I'm inside and all good.
Same in London. I love this topic. I think foldables are so cool. I've never actually seen one in real life, but I think the possibilities are endless. So I wanted to ask you, when you are coming up with stuff for the APIs or for any of these patterns that you showed, do you have actual test devices? How much is emulated and how much is real hardware?
As I currently work remote, like I don't have any test devices, but some of my coworkers, they do. They even have access to like some prototypes, and we're like I work at Intel. We talk to a lot of OEMs, so I have seen some things that I still cannot share about, like what people are thinking, OEMs are thinking about when the technology matures. Like you're gonna see a lot of like very interesting devices coming to market. But what is really important is that really need the web and applications to support these kind of devices. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Why would people buy them if you cannot really take advantage of it? So that is why we're working on this as early as possible. But a lot of things to consider, a lot of like APIs, a lot of, like I said, the fold angle, multiple screens, like you see the foldable screens. Definitely, that is the long-term thing. That's when I'm going to come to market. Want to get people very excited. But it's early technology. Some people or companies like Microsoft is toying around with dual screens where you kind of like get the same, just a hint in between. But you can also fold it all the way around because you don't have all the mechanics. And I even think like something like the Surface Duo phone is a pretty exciting device. And I know people have tried it and love it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So when you are working on this, maybe on like the APIs or the specs, how far in the future are you thinking? Like, are you thinking of stuff for like 6 months, a year, 5 years?
All of them, I would basically say. So like Microsoft already has the Surface Duo as an Android device in the market today, and it supports some of these API kind of like as an experiment. So like they would like something to ship as soon as possible. We also have Google working on supporting like the Windows placement APIs, like for multiple displays. So you might have like on your desktop computer, you have multiple like monitors. Like if you work on the stock market, you probably have like 6 or 8 monitors around you. So you want like application to be able to expand across these or show on one screen or the other screen. So we're trying to look at all these kind of use cases, like the hinge, the multi-internal and external monitors thing, plus like the angle and all of this, and try to come up with an API, a simple API for the common case that we can ship as soon as possible, but also APIs for what's coming next. Like we don't want to come up with an API today that we have to kind of like throw away in a couple of years and say, no, everyone should migrate to this new API. And dealing and juggling with all those kind of different ideas is kind of like the challenge. But I do believe that we'll have something shipping at least within a year, like at least part of it, and it will be quite nice. So actually this week we are having meetings in the W3C, it's the World Wide Web Consortium. We even had this morning or late evening for the people in the US.
Today?
Yes, today. So I
Wow.
got up at started at 7 a.m. having meetings for 3 hours about this topic.
Oh my God.
So yeah, like everyone is collaborating. People from Google, Microsoft, Intel, Samsung. Everyone wants this to see to become through to see fruition, and I definitely believe we'll get there.
That's really cool. How do you think it's too early? Because you said, of course, like APIs are going to be changing, maybe, to start thinking about like learning how to do some of this stuff, or is it now a good time to start? Has anyone even made any resources for that, or are we not there yet?
Yeah, I would say I don't think that the APIs are going to like change, like crazily be totally different. It's like kind of the same concepts. Right now, it's more like how do we integrate all these kind of APIs? Like an API, we have a separate API for the fold angle. We have one for the window segments when you have like one virtual screen, but it's actually made up of physical screens. And then we have the multi monitors, like the Windows placement API. So it's more like how do we integrate those? Because I might take my Surface Duo tablet-like device and use that as an external monitor to my laptop, like you can today can do with an iPad or Mac OS. So like these need to be integrated. So it's kind of it might be changed a little bit in the API surface, but it's probably gonna be the same concepts. So this is the reason why we created like these polyfills. So a polyfill is kind of like you know, you have a hole in your wall, you fixed it with some polyfill.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like the web has a hole in this API surface, and we give you this thing. Actually, as this is not an API yet, like that's stable, standardized, some people call it a polyfill because it probably will be that way. And that gives people the ability to play around with this today. As you'll see on the Microsoft blog, we just published, me and my coworker, I think a couple of days ago, an article about this Battlefield kind of game. You saw the other example that like you can play around with this today. Those examples exist there online. And just play around with it. Give us feedback, because that is what we need to make the right API. Like, don't expect us to come up with a perfect API without any feedback from developers. No, we need the developers.
Yeah,
feedback.
definitely. It's so
Please
important.
play around with it already today. It's fun, and write some articles, and yeah.
So when you are coming up with these things, obviously you have the battleship example. Do you ever sit there and think of like what other possibilities? Because I know you showed like, oh, it's a tent, or it's a folded this way or this way. Like, what are other things that you think we could end up doing with foldable screens?
Yeah, definitely. Like everything we do in standards is supposed to be driven by use cases. It's not like, hey, we made this API and I'll figure out what to do with it, because that's not a good way to create an API. Like we want to like look at the use cases. And so I think for the game, like the tent mode, I was thinking about like, yeah, tent mode, cool. Like I want to watch Netflix, but I'm just using one screen. But maybe it's a game like I'm not supposed to see what's on the other screen. So like we're definitely thinking about use cases. That's also why we don't just write an API. We try to come up with a nice API design, discuss it in the community, but then we also write the polyfill so people can play around with it, and we can play around with it. Like it's our own dog food. So that's why we go ahead and we write these demos, like the image demo, or like the Battlefield demo, or whatever other demo that we think of and have the time to actually go ahead and do. Of course, we cannot write all the demos in the world, and that's why we're doing this to encourage and get developers excited, so they will write the demos for us, and we'll get that feedback, and we'll end up with something that's great.
Yeah, it's like crowdsourcing.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, this is going to be an everybody problem, and you've clearly been collaborating with all these other companies on the W3C or with the APIs. How is that collaboration going?
I think it's going great, to be honest. I feel like Intel, like our company, has worked on this field for many years because there's a lot of technicalities. Like when you have like two folds, where do you put the battery? Where do you put the processor? So there's like, it's not just like, okay, now we just add a fold in between. That's actually difficult and it's expensive. Also, like you see Samsung doing a lot of research in how to make a real fold, like real hinge that is high quality and the like. So this is just improving. So definitely we have a vested interests with Microsoft and Samsung and Google, everyone in making this a success. And I think for this reason, like it's going great with the collaboration. We all work on the web. We all want the web to succeed. So we just want to come up with the best product, the best APIs for developers. Because like we can all ship these devices, but if at the end of the day there's no website, no apps, no nothing that works with it, like it's wasted effort. So we need those apps. We need developers engaged. And then we can differentiate and compete against each other. But like we want it to be a success.
First we work together and then we can all go off in different directions.
That's how it is.
It just occurred to me that a foldable device, especially one that wraps around, like you mentioned, is just more surface space for me to drop and break. And now I'm really stressed out. Yeah, because I always drop my phones.
Yeah, but I never drop mine, so like not everyone has those problems.
No.
But like I guess like that's why like if you just look at the Gorilla Glass, when people got like the first I think iPhone with Gorilla Glass, like if you dropped it, it will still crack pretty easily. Now we have like Gorilla Glass 5 or 6 or something, and it's like so much more sturdy. People have really learned how to make this sturdy. So I think today, if you look at something like the Surface Duo, well, it's very thin, so that makes it maybe a little bit brittle. But like the quality of the screens is just two regular screens with a physical hinge in between, and like that's kind of sturdy. And normally when you walk around with it, you'll close it so you don't have any screen on the outside. So I guess that's probably as sturdy as any phone today. Of course, like an actual foldable screen where you can get dirt in the middle and all of that, like that is new. You cannot put like a regular glass protector on it. But like technology will arise, like it will take a while. So like good people that don't drop their phones like me will buy it maybe, and maybe in a couple of years like it'll be sturdy enough that you can buy it too.
I'm a danger to phones, I'm telling you. Every single phone I've had has broken somewhere. Okay, Kenneth, thank you so much for joining us. I would like to ask you to hop on your Discord channel to answer any questions people might have and to share any resources or where you want feedback, because I know you mentioned you would love feedback. So drop that in the chat.
Okay.
And thank you for joining us. Have a good day.
Okay, enjoy the conference. Take care.